A 2018 Ipsos Global Adviser study said that South Africa had the highest incidence of cyberbullying in the world. That study was conducted in about 28 countries. Online bullying or being targeted can have a severe psychological impact, and often the only recourse that people have is to seek legal intervention to stop the bullying. But this can be a costly exercise, with the majority of South Africans not being able to afford the services of an attorney. With me in studio is Siphosethu Ngubane, a victim of cyberbullying, Palesa Radebe, a psychologist, and Modise Sefume, a lawyer. Thanks all so much for your time. Perhaps, Siphosethu, I'll start with you. What happened and why do you feel you were cyberbullied?
Okay, I wrote on Twitter about my story that I'm facing with. I need help to someone who can help me. I have a problem. I'm pregnant and I'm 8 months pregnant. So my father's child ran away and I don't know where is he. So I wrote to Twitter to find someone who can help me, and then people, they said I'm lying and it's not true. And they said I just used a Bush's account. So she told me that he got help from Twitter about school, so he came with her account to give me and get help too. So people can come with the wrong ways and tell me that I'm lying. Is Bushle, is not me. So I want to tell people that it's not Bushle, it's me. Then they take an advantage. So I write to Twitter so that I'm in a situation. So my mom was passed on 2014 and she left me with my siblings, and my grandmother doesn't have money to help me about my child, so I want anyone to help me.
Palesa, we saw from Siphosethu's interactions with people online that people said she was a scammer and that she was lying about being pregnant, about being 22 years old and the like. What's the psychological impact of one having so much information at our disposal and constantly being exposed to so much, and then having a community of people turning against you in a situation perhaps like the one Siphosethu is in?
I think the biggest one is that an individual ends up feeling as though they're put into an imposter syndrome. It's what we call an imposter syndrome. So you find yourself being called out as a fraud, and then in a very common sense kind of taking on and believing that wrong idea about yourself. So then what then happens is you find yourself incapable of approaching other individuals and having that self-doubt and lack of sense of understanding for yourself in moving forward with whatever else you might be trying to kind of deal with. So because you find that people, when we're in a social kind of setting, or rather a social media kind of setting, we are a lot more stronger and feeling a little bit more confident about the bad words or the uncomfortable words that we say. So you can kind of have a sense of courage to say the things that you know you wouldn't necessarily say in a face-to-face capacity. So what it does for the person on the other side is they start doubting whether the things that they're going through are really valid, number one, if there really are problems, number two, and then you start questioning whether or not you should ever step out and ask for assistance when you really and genuinely need it. So it hits a lot about your sense of self, your sense of self-esteem, and whether or not the world is a welcoming and understanding place. So you shut down and avoid interactions with other people sometimes.
Okay, would you say there's currently no legislation in South Africa, if I'm understanding correctly, that deals specifically with social media? So what do you do if you're someone who's either attacked online and one, you can't afford the services of, say, Sefume attorneys? Yeah. What do you do? What recourse do you have?
So I think, culturally the problem is people think that you can make these social media statements with impunity, which is a big problem. So as attorneys and as legal practitioners, when we advise our own clients, we would then say, let's get a cease and desist letter out where we physically stop that person. We write a letter to them saying, you need to stop your actions, failing which we will then take you to court and launch an urgent interdict. Whereas if someone is, indigent, they don't have those monies to come to people like myself to get those services. So in that course, you'd look at the Protection from Harassment Act, which would then help you in that you would be able to approach a clerk of the magistrate's court, so the court nearest to you, and you would then be able to provide them with your documentation, your ID and everything else, and obviously evidence of what's happened, and you would then be able to get a protection order against the person who's continuing to make those defamatory statements, and that interim order would then be made into a final protection order. So it doesn't go so far as to put you back in the place where you were as a defamation instance would, but it does go a long way to helping someone stop someone from, you know, injuring their dignity and you know, their reputation, as it were.
Siphosethu, why did you feel that you needed to go onto Twitter to ask for help as opposed to going to members in your community where you stay or the like?
Okay, so I met with Buhle. She is my neighbor, and I help her to do something like about her hair. So she tell me that she get help on Twitter about school. So she tell me that I can get help too. So I write to Twitter and I use her account. So this is why people, they know that I'm lying.
They think that you're lying?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you do in a situation like that when basically a whole community is saying to you that you're lying and you don't actually need help, you're not actually pregnant, and you're 14 years old, not 22 years old?
The thing is, it wasn't that. So they think that I'm lying because maybe I was used in the Bushle's account. So that's why I'm here to apologize to everyone who think that I'm lying.
Palesa, what are the short-term and long-term effects of someone going through something like this? And where do you draw the line between saying someone's being cyberbullied or people are also tired, because there are many instances, and we're not commenting on the veracity of what's happening here, where someone says that they need help, but they actually don't and they are actually lying?
That's very hard sometimes to kind of differentiate between whether it's a true story or not. Because as I'd said, because of the facade that comes with Facebook and just any other type of social media account, you can't necessarily go into the person's background, and there's only limited information for you to kind of extend a little bit further and get as much information as possible. So when, like I said earlier, when we get into this position, you end up questioning a lot about to what extent you can seek assistance, and to the extent of which these individuals will then be able to give that to you. So you sit back and you get knocked heavily in terms of, like I said, your self-esteem and your capacity to kind of believe in human nature in the general sense, especially when you find yourself in a space where you're alone and not necessarily having much more support than just yourself and perhaps the people around you. So it's just the self-esteem that gets knocked extensively, but then also your health also kind of does play out in that capacity, because we know that with mental health, your physical symptoms do show up as well. And when I think about someone like Siphosethu in terms of her pregnancy, that then has multiple effects in terms of should something, God forbid, happens with her child, then that can also be another hurdle that she kind of has to step over. That did I take the wrong step that affected my child and my health, and then what are the repercussions following that? So it goes beyond just surface level, but it goes much deeper and further for years to come possibly, if we don't necessarily just take a step back and rather look at the person at what it is they're trying to do and the reasoning behind it, opposed to just jumping in and making assumptions wherever it is you might be standing.
Okay, Modise, I know we're speaking about specific stories, but I also want us to have a broader overview of it. So if I can go online and I can see someone, there are a few known scammers out there. I see someone who scammed me and I say, T is a scammer. Is that cyberbullying, or is that me telling the truth? When do I know that I've crossed the line? So,
with one of the requirements, one of the characteristics of defamation is, we need to look at fair comment. If someone says something about me, which is fair comment, then it doesn't, cross the line to defamation. Defamation is necessarily, or it's underpinned by Section 16 of the Constitution, where everyone has a right to freedom of expression. So you need to think of, when you are speaking about someone in whatever terms and whatever context, you can't speak so freely as to infringe on their rights. And that's where the secret lies. You have to be very conscious of what you're saying about people, and to the extent that you cross that line, then it would be defamation. And there's no hard and fast rule to say what is that line. You know, it depends on each case by case, but it's also quite contextual. You know, if you were saying the president is this, or someone in a higher position or status or reputation is a scammer, then you know, then it's easier for someone to say, well, that's defamatory because of the status that person holds in the community. So it does really depend on the circumstances, and no individual or no case is exactly the same in as far as defamation is concerned.
Okay, help me understand, and I don't want to talk about the truth or not the truth, I just want to understand your experience of what happened from the moment that you posted that tweet, because you say someone gave you her account to use, she had a good experience on Twitter. I'm assuming you thought the same thing was going to happen. Just take me through what happened as you posted the tweet and what happened afterwards.
They respond to me. So they tell me that, so I asked Butle's sister to help me to write on Twitter because I'm not good enough in English. So I asked her to help me, and she do that. And people, they come back and talk things like, so someone who can, he want my number, and he called me and told me that he want to kill me because I'm lying.
What else has happened? I'm just trying to get a sense of someone who hasn't been on the end of, you know, continued people saying, you know, that I'm lying. I just want to understand what else happened.
From now, maybe you can repeat your question.
After what else happened? What other things are people saying to you? I know people were questioning why you're tweeting from an iPad. Perhaps why can't you sell that iPad if you need assistance so much? So I'm just trying to understand what else happened and how else you've experienced whatever's happened on Twitter.
My experience that
wakhuluma ngesiZulu okanye ngesiXhosa? Do you want to take a break and we speak about this a little bit later on? Palesa, perhaps I can ask, we've spoken about the short-term and the long-term impact of people who are on the receiving end of what happens. But I'd like to speak about the psychology of someone perhaps who genuinely believes that someone is lying, and they also need to teach that person a lesson because they are tired of perhaps being lied to online. And the mentality of someone who's saying, I'm actually tired of dealing with people coming onto Twitter and not telling the truth. And the kind of group mentality that goes around that.
Yeah. Well, we've got to remember that with every type of behavior that we engage in, it's based on an experience and a personal experience, good or bad, and the way in which you react to it is kind of fed by how it is your past experience kind of told you how to kind of maneuver through it. And so you'd find that the person on the giving end, the perpetrator, if we can call them that, has found themselves in many instances where they have, as you said, probably been scammed themselves and know that there are repercussions leading out of it. So maybe I'm thinking I can put a stop to it because I have a personal experience and I can forward it on to you. And hopefully in my own corner, I can give a bit of assistance. So you end up feeling as though I need to take the lead and educate people based on my solo experience. And what we then tend to do as individuals, if there's just one element or one indication that this is a possibility, we tend to jump onto it. Why? Because the idea of injustice is something that we as human beings don't necessarily enjoy engaging with in a communal space, but then also on an individual capacity. So when we're able to kind of engage with it on a platform where we're hidden away and we have a little bit more of a louder voice away from the people in the eyes and the ability to kind of question you at an instantaneous capacity, we feel a little bit stronger about it. So the group think that often happens is based on that, because I can say one thing, then you just jump on. You hear a little bit of a word that triggers you, a sentence that kind of mimics whatever experience you've experienced in the past, and you think you have the whole story. So I jump on, and then 2, 3, 4 people, before we know it, we've got a whole mirage or parade of individuals speaking the same thing, but probably from different contexts. And that's where it becomes the biggest problem, because you're saying one thing, I'm saying something else, and then we end up thinking we're talking about the same, drawing the same conclusion, and that's not the case. So that becomes very volatile and problematic, and puts people like Siphosethu in positions where, that you feel defeated and unwanted by a society that doesn't necessarily understand what it is you're going through, or even give you the opportunity to explain yourself fully. So groupthink is completely detrimental, because it has thousands of voices speaking to you at once, on the basis of our individual understandings, which is not fully well versed or collaborative in many ways.
Would you say, when do we cross the line and say, I need to take this matter further and I want to take it legal?
So I think, it's all very subjective, because it's your reputation. It's how you feel you've been defamed. It's your right to dignity that has been infringed upon. And I mean, reputation is something that you've built over years or whatever the case may be. So once that's happened, or once a person feels that they've had their reputation maligned, that's when you would, approach either an attorney, or, like I said, you can use a protection order. But, if you're a person of means, the easiest way is to probably approach an attorney, which is not necessarily fair to everyone, because not everyone can afford an attorney. But there are other means. There's your universities where there's law clinics, and there's Pretoria law clinics and the like. But I mean, equally, there's, as attorneys who are practicing, there is a responsibility on attorneys to help indigent clients, through pro bono and the like. But I would encourage people to take matters on, even if it doesn't necessarily, put them in a better position financially. But there are times where you have to, put aside your interest, and if you have a situation before you where someone really needs it, then you need to put your services to the good of the community.
Siphosethu, we're about to end the interview. What would you like to say to people who are watching and the people that you've interacted with? You can speak in English, you can speak in Zulu.
Okay. Kubo bonke abantu ababukelayo indaba engizelela ukuthi ngizoxolisa kakhulu ukuthi babone ngazuthi ngumuntu engesiwuye. Mina ngokwambe ngizama ukuthi ngithole usizo. Bengingakhona ukuthi ngoba mhlambe ngifuna ukuthi abantu bangisize ngendlela mhlambe ukuthi akusimina, like ngifuna imali ngendlela ephansi, kanti cha, ingoba bengidinga umuntu ozongisiza ukuthi ngiphume kule nkinga engibhekene nayo njengamanje, ngoba anginayo umuntu ozongisiza. And ngeke ngize ngisho ukuthi ngibhekelele kugogo, because ugogo uhola impesheni and ubhekelele ukuthi alale idlile naye nengane lezi uma after ngishiye nazo.
Thank you all so much for your time on The Full View tonight. I really appreciate all of your insights. Siphosethu